Hi everyone, welcome to the first week of Tot Time Summer Camp. This week's theme is nature behavior. So we're going to learn about how to act in nature. Today's story is called Giant Thoughtless, and I'm going to read it to you. It's about a giant. Once upon a time, there was a small village nestled in a valley between two great mountains. It was a beautiful place where the people were very happy. The villagers had small patches of garden in their yards where they grew every kind of fruit and vegetable. Children played and danced in the streets without fear. Men and women whistled and sang as they went about their daily business. In the evenings and on holidays, everyone came to the square in the center of the town to play games and hold contests. They all knew each other, and they all helped each other when help was needed. On the far side of one of the great mountains lived a huge giant. When he stood tall, he nearly reached the top of the highest trees. He was a playful fellow, full of curiosities and great energy. Every morning, no matter what the weather, he would hike all over his side of the mountain. He would hop across streams, wade through the rivers, and shake the branches of huge trees, his huge feet thumping across the land. His days were full of marvelous discoveries and happy adventures. One day in the spring, the giant woke up, rubbed his eyes, and said to himself, "I have explored every part of this whole mountainside. I wonder what I would find if I climbed over the top." After he ate his breakfast, he washed his face in the river. He started up the mountain. Up, up, up he went over rocks and boulders. It seemed as though he would touch the sky itself. At last he stood at the top, and Thoughtless gave out a roar of delight, for he was certain that he was the first to have climbed so high. "Hooray for me! Hooray for me!" he shouted and waved his arms. His long shadow stretched down the mountain for many miles. At the foot of the mountain, in the small village, the people stood in shocked amazement. They have never before seen or heard such a large fellow. The giant gazed all around the countryside, and finally his eyes rested on the people of the small village. "Oh ho!" he roared. "What is this?" His curiosity sent him bounding down the mountain of the village. Kaboom! 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 And boom! Down he came with such a noise that the children of the village froze in terror. Mothers and fathers snatched them up and ran for the shelter of their houses. They slammed shutters and stood behind locked doors, armed with pitchforks. With a great kaboom, the giant landed on the bottom of the valley. He gazed at the village, which was now silent and still. "Ah, where did they all go? I wanted to play with them," he said sorrowfully. The giant began to crawl about the streets of the village, looking for the little people. He poked his finger in every opening he could find. He turned over horse carts, shook bins and boxes, and crunched small things that he didn't even see. The people trembled behind the doors, too afraid to go out and chase away the creature who was so destructive. Thoughtless sat in the village square, scratching his head and tapping on the roofs of the houses. Then he got an idea. He lay down in the middle of the village square and brought his eye close enough to a window of one of the little houses. With his fingernail, he pried open a squeaky shutter and peered inside. There, under a tiny bed, was a girl child of the little people. The giant reached inside with one finger, drew her out from under the bed. He lifted Arya into the sunlight and placed her on his giant hand. The little girl began to kick, scratch, and punch every part of the giant that she could. Auraria screamed and shook her fist at him and bit him hard on the thumb. "Ow!" shouted the giant as he shook the little girl off of his hand onto a pile of hay. "What did you do that for?" "What for? What for? You dragged me out of my house, lift me into your hand, scare me half to death, and when I bite you, you ask what for? What would you do if someone a zillion times bigger than you came to your house and did that to you?" "But I didn't mean any harm. I was just playing." "Just playing? Look at what you did. You have destroyed a whole week's worth by upsetting all of those boxes and bins. The carts are broken into pieces. Half the roofs in town will have to be replaced. You knocked off porches and knocked down street lamps. You terrorized everyone in town, and you are just playing? You break things before you even know what they are or what they mean. Don't you have any respect for other people's belongings?" The giant's eyes filled with tears, and he began to cry. "I only wanted to play. I only want to find out about things. I want everybody to like me and be friendly." "Good grief," said Arya. "Stop crying. You are getting me all wet." Each giant-sized tear was equal to a tub full of water, and she was afraid he might cause a flood. "If you want to be a friend, you should come quietly the first time. Come and ask to see. Be gentle when you're in a village. Watch out where you put those big feet. Don't break things when you don't even know what they are. If you are polite, you will be a much better friend." "Oh," whimpered the giant as he wiped the last tear from his eyes. In the following days, the giant returned, but this time he was different. He helped them rebuild their village by carrying wood and helping them to make bricks. He enjoyed many happy days playing with the little people and watching them at play. He came often, but he came quietly, and he was much, much more polite. After a while, the people changed his name from Giant Thoughtless to Giant Thoughtful. And that's our story about our giant. Do you think that you could be a giant? Let's just think about that. Because we're pretty big, and whenever we walk outside, who knows what's below our feet? Now, what happened in the story that disturbed the lives of the people? It was that the giant came running down into the village and destroyed everything. But do you think that Thoughtless was an evil giant? Was he purposely trying to hurt that village and the people? I don't think so. He didn't understand that he was causing harm. And what did Auraria, the little girl, what did she do when Thoughtless picked her up from under her bed? She kicked and scratched him as hard as she could. And what did she say to Thoughtless that let him know he did something wrong? She said that he breaks everything before he even knows what it is. But did the story have a happy ending? What do you think? I think so. Because now the giant helped rebuild the village. He destroyed it, but he learned how to be gentle and helped all those little people out to rebuild their houses. How could we be like Giant Thoughtless when we visit a wild area? Because we're, like I said, we're a lot bigger than many of the little creatures. We have little insects that live in the grass and in the soil. We have birds and a bunch of different animals. And we don't want to destroy their homes. That's why we want to be gentle whenever we go outside. We want to walk carefully. We don't want to poke our fingers or stick them into small holes. We don't want to put our fingers in anything when we're outside. And we want to leave the area the way you found it, especially if you're like going on a hike or camping. You don't want to leave any garbage outside, because if we leave garbage or some of our toys or equipment around, we could be accidentally ruining the homes of all the little animals that live outside. Because even though we can't see them sometimes, they're still there. Just like the giant didn't know where all the little people went. He was just trying to find everything and explore. And it's okay to explore. We love to explore the outdoors. We just want to be careful with where we're running and where we're putting our fingers in our hands, because we don't want to accidentally destroy the homes of all those little animals in nature, just like the giant did in our story. And that's our story for today. I hope you enjoyed it.